The warning came at exactly 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, when most of the planet was either sleeping or finishing their late shifts. The massive alien ships appeared without any sound, floating silently above every major city on Earth like dark clouds that blocked out the stars. Admiral Patricia Blake was pulled from her bed by 3 urgent phone calls. The first came from Space Command in Colorado, the second from the European Defense Network in Geneva. The third was from her own aide, Lieutenant Danny Ford, whose voice shook as he spoke. "Admiral, you need to see this. They're everywhere. Every major city, every space station. They just appeared out of nowhere." Patricia threw on her uniform and rushed to the command center. The main screen showed a view from orbit, and what she saw made her stomach drop. Dozens of alien warships hung in space around Earth, each one the size of a city block. They were dark gray metal with strange glowing lines running along their sides. They looked like nothing humans had ever built. "How many?" she asked. 47. "Ships, Admiral. All in perfect formation. They're not moving, not firing, just waiting." Patricia stared at the screen. In 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. Earth's space defense grid was impressive, but these ships made their best warships look like toys. "Any communication attempts?" "Yes, ma'am. We've tried every frequency. No response for the first 2 hours. Then this came through." Danny played the recording. The voice was deep and strange, with sounds that human throats could never make. But somehow the words came through clearly in perfect English. "People of Earth, I am Supreme Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our great civilization. You have proven yourselves worthy of our attention through your rapid technological development and your expansion into space." Patricia felt her hands clench into fists. The alien continued speaking. "However, we do not simply take worlds without giving their inhabitants a chance to prove their worth. This is our way. Our honor demands it. You will select your greatest warrior to face our champion in single combat. If your warrior wins, we will grant you time to negotiate terms for your peaceful integration into our empire. If your warrior loses, we will begin orbital bombardment of your military installations and major population centers." The recording paused, and Patricia could hear her own heart beating. "You have 72 hours to choose your champion, and prepare for combat. The battle will take place on the asteroid designated as Epsilon 7 in your system's outer belt. Transport will be provided. We await your response." The message ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. Patricia looked around at her staff. These were good people, smart people, but she could see the fear in their eyes. Who could possibly stand against alien warriors who commanded technology that could cross space and appear above Earth without warning? "Get me the president," she said, "and the defense secretary, and someone find out everything we can about combat between humans and aliens. Check every database, every science fiction story, every military scenario we've ever run." While her staff scrambled to make calls and pull up files, Patricia stared at the alien ships on the screen. Each one probably carried enough firepower to level a continent. They were giving humanity a chance, but it felt like a cat playing with a mouse before killing it. 3 hours later, the emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council was in full swing. President Karen White looked tired but determined. Defense Secretary Robert Shun had dark circles under his eyes. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders on Earth, and they were all talking at once. "We need to send Captain Steve Martinez," said General Connor Hayes. "He's our best Special Forces operative, trained in 17 different fighting styles, cybernetic enhancements, combat experience in the Mars colonies. Special Forces won't be enough. argued Dr. Lisa Chun from the Enhanced Human Research Division. We should use subject Delta 7 from the Super Soldier program. Enhanced strength, speed, reaction time, and pain tolerance. What about sending multiple fighters? CUGGESTED Admiral Blake. Maybe they'll accept a team. No, said Dr. Ashley Moore, the xenobiology expert they had called in. I've been studying the language patterns in their message. The phrase single combat appears multiple times. They're very specific about it being one warrior against one warrior. This seems to be some kind of cultural or religious practice for them. President White rubbed her temples. So we're betting the entire planet on one person winning a fight against an alien warrior. Do we even know what their champion looks like? What it can do? We've been analyzing their ships, said Dr. Chun. The technology is at least 50 years ahead of ours. If their warriors are enhanced to the same degree, we're looking at something that could probably tear through a tank with its bare hands. The room fell quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. Earth was probably going to lose. Meanwhile, 400 kilometers above Earth, Chief Engineer Jake Morrison was having what he considered the worst day of his career. The Meridian Space Station was supposed to be humanity's pride and joy, a research facility that pushed the boundaries of technology and served as a stepping stone to the outer planets. Instead, it was currently a floating disaster that seemed determined to kill everyone aboard. The fusion reactor was running at dangerous temperatures. The artificial gravity generators were cycling on and off every few minutes, making everyone on the station feel sick. The communication array was picking up strange interference that made it impossible to get a clear signal to Earth. And now, Jake's coffee maker had broken. Come on, you piece of junk, Jake muttered, hitting the machine with his wrench. I fixed you yesterday. You're supposed to work for at least a week. Jake was not a large man. He was average height, with brown hair that always looked messy and clothes that always had grease stains. He had been fixing things since he was 5 years old, when he took apart his father's radio and somehow managed to put it back together, so it worked better than before. Now, at 32, he was the best engineer in the Earth Defense Force, which meant he got to fix the most complicated problems with the least amount of help. Morrison, we need you in Engineering Bay 3, came the voice over the intercom. The quantum resonator is acting up again. Jake sighed and picked up his toolbox. The quantum resonator was a piece of equipment that most people thought was magic. It helped the station communicate instantly with Earth, no matter how far away they were. Jake understood exactly how it worked, which is why he knew it was held together with spare parts and prayers. On my way, he said into his communicator. But I'm warning you, if that thing explodes, I'm not cleaning up the mess. As Jake walked through the station, he could feel the artificial gravity flickering. The lights dimmed and brightened in an irregular pattern. Through the windows, he could see the alien ships floating around Earth like dark predators. Great, he said to himself. As if my day couldn't get any worse. Now we've got aliens messing with my equipment. Jake had no idea that in 6 hours, he would be called down to Earth for an emergency briefing. He had no idea that a simple paperwork error would make him humanity's champion against an alien empire. He had no idea that his wrench and his bad attitude were about to save the world. All he knew was that the quantum resonator was making a sound that machines should not make, and if he didn't fix it soon, the entire station was going to lose contact. With Earth at the worst possible time, Jake Morrison rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The debate in the Defense Council chamber had been going on for 12 hours straight. Empty coffee cups and food containers covered the table. Everyone looked exhausted, but nobody wanted to be the first to suggest they take a break. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and they still had no answer. General Connor Hayes stood up and pointed at a hologram floating above the table. It showed the profile of a tall, muscular man in military uniform. "Captain Steve Martinez is our best option," he said for the fourth time. "Look at his record. 37 successful missions. Expert in hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical analysis. He's never lost a fight." "Against humans," said Dr. Lisa Chun, shaking her head. "We have no idea what we're facing. Their warrior could be 3 meters tall and made of metal for all we know." Admiral Blake rubbed her eyes. She had been awake for almost 2 days now, trying to coordinate Earth's response, while also managing the panic that was spreading across the planet. News of the alien ships had leaked despite their best efforts. Every major city was reporting. Riots, prayer gatherings, and people trying to flee to the countryside. "What about the enhanced soldiers?" asked President White. "Dr. Chun, tell me about your super soldier program." Dr. Chun pulled up another hologram. This one showed a woman with obvious cybernetic implants along her arms and neck. Subject Delta 7, real name Amy Rodriguez. "We've enhanced her strength by 300%, reaction time by 500%. She can punch through steel and dodge bullets. But she's still experimental. We don't know how the enhancements will hold up under extreme stress. And she's never been in real combat," added General Hayes. "Martinez has actual experience." Defense Secretary Robert Chun leaned forward. "What about Kevin Thompson? He won the Global Martial Arts Championship 3 years running. Or maybe Sarah Williams from the Enhanced Athletes Program?" The argument continued. Everyone had a favorite candidate, but nobody could agree. Time was running out, and they were no closer to a decision than when they started. Outside the meeting room, Lieutenant Danny Ford was trying to coordinate the thousands of details that came with preparing for first contact with hostile aliens. His desk was covered with reports from scientists, military analysts, and intelligence officers. Most of them were guessing, but some of the information was useful. "Sir," called Sergeant Lisa Park from across the room. "We're getting strange. Readings from the Meridian Station. Their chief engineer is requesting immediate transport to Earth for emergency equipment repairs." Danny looked up from his papers. "Emergency repairs? Now? Can't it wait?" "He says their quantum resonator is completely broken, and if they don't fix it in the next few hours, we'll lose all communication with our outer system monitoring stations. With the alien ships here, we need those sensors working." Danny sighed. Another problem to add to the list. "Fine, send a transport, but make it quick. We don't have time for routine maintenance right now." Jake Morrison climbed aboard the transport. Ship 3 hours later, carrying his toolbox and looking annoyed. The pilot, a young man named Tony Martinez, tried to make conversation during the flight down to Earth. "So, heard about the aliens?" Tony asked. "Hard not to," Jake replied, checking his tools. "They're messing with my communication arrays. Whatever they're using for propulsion is creating electromagnetic interference across 17 different frequencies. Aren't you worried? I mean, they could destroy the planet." Jake looked up from his toolbox. "Kid, I've been worried about things breaking down and exploding every day for the past 10 years. These aliens are just another problem that needs fixing. The difference is, this time it's not my job to fix them." The transport landed at the main Earth Defense Command base in Colorado. Jake had been there before for equipment briefings, but never during a crisis. The place was buzzing with activity. People in military uniforms ran back and forth carrying papers and shouting orders. Scientists in lab coats argued loudly about alien technology. News reporters tried to sneak past security guards. Jake just wanted to find whoever was in charge of equipment requisitions, get his parts, and return to his station. Instead, he found himself stopped by 3 different security checkpoints and Eventually escorted to a waiting room outside the main conference chamber. "Wait here," said the guard. "Someone will be with you shortly." Jake sat down and pulled out a technical manual. He had been reading about quantum field harmonics for 20 minutes when the door burst open. "Jake Morrison?" asked a tired-looking woman in an admiral's uniform. "That's me. Look, I just need some replacement parts for a quantum resonator. The part number is QR7749 Delta. Should take about 5 minutes to process the request." Admiral Blake stared at him. "Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid there's been a mix-up. You're not here for equipment. You're here for the alien situation briefing." Jake closed his manual and looked at her like she was crazy. "I'm an engineer, not a soldier. I fix things. I don't fight aliens. Please, just come into the briefing room. We'll explain everything." Jake followed Admiral Blake into the chamber, where the most important people on Earth were still arguing about who to send as humanity's champion. The conversation stopped when they walked in. President White looked at Jake, then at Admiral Blake. "This is our volunteer?" "There's been some confusion," Admiral Blake said quickly. "Mr. Morrison is here about equipment repairs." Jake looked around the room at all the serious faces staring at him. "Okay, what's going on? And why does everyone look like someone died?" Dr. Lisa Chun explained the situation. The alien ultimatum. The single combat challenge. The search for Earth's greatest warrior. As she talked, Jake's expression went from confused to annoyed to angry. "So let me get this straight," Jake said when she finished. "These aliens show up, park their ships around my planet, mess up my equipment, and now they want to fight somebody? And you people have been sitting here for 12 hours trying to decide who to send?" "It's not that simple," General Hayes said. "We need someone who can actually win." "And you think sending a soldier or a super soldier is going to work?" Jake asked. "These aliens have technology that's 50 years ahead of ours. They probably have warriors that could tear your best fighter in half. Then what do you suggest?" President White asked. Jake stood up and started pacing. "I suggest you stop thinking like this is a fair fight. It's not. They have better technology, better weapons, probably better training. If you try to beat them at their own game, you're going to lose." "So we should just surrender?" General Hayes asked. "No," Jake said, getting more animated. "You should cheat. You should be smarter. You should look for weaknesses in their technology and exploit them. You should treat this like an engineering problem, not a boxing match." The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at Jake, who was now gesturing with a wrench he had pulled from his toolbox. "Mr. Morrison," President White said slowly, "are you volunteering to be our champion?" Jake stopped pacing. "What?" "No, I'm not a fighter. I'm an engineer. I fix things." "But you just said we should approach this like an engineering problem," Dr. Chun pointed out. "Well, yes, but I meant you should send an engineer to advise your fighter, not send the engineer to do the fighting." Admiral Blake was looking at some papers on her desk. "Actually, there might be a problem with changing our approach now. I've been reading the alien communication protocols. They're very specific about honor and formal procedures. We've already acknowledged their challenge and indicated we're selecting a champion." "So?" Jake asked. "So if we change our selection process now, they might consider it an insult. They could decide we're not taking their challenge seriously and just attack immediately." Lieutenant Danny Ford rushed into the room carrying a tablet. "Admiral, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a paperwork error. When Mr. Morrison's transport was scheduled, someone in processing listed him as a combat consultation volunteer instead of technical repair specialist. The form was automatically forwarded to the alien ships as part of our champion selection." Notification. Everyone turned to stare at Danny, then at Jake. "You mean," President White said slowly, The aliens think we've already chosen Jake Morrison as our champion? Yes, ma'am. The notification went out 20 minutes ago. Jake sat down heavily in a chair. This is not happening. Admiral Blake was reading through more documents. According to their honor code, once a champion is officially declared, no substitutions are allowed. It's considered a sacred commitment. But I'm not a warrior, Jake protested. I'm an engineer. I carry a wrench, not a sword. The aliens don't know that, Dr. Chun said. To them, you're humanity's chosen champion. General Hayes was shaking his head. We can't send a civilian engineer to fight an alien warrior. It's suicide. We might not have a choice, Admiral Blake said. If we try to change our selection now, they'll consider it a breach of honor and begin their attack. Jake looked around the room at all the faces staring at him. Politicians, generals, scientists, all of them looking at him like he was their last hope. He thought about his broken coffee maker, his malfunctioning quantum resonator, and the electromagnetic interference the alien ships were causing. Fine, he said, standing up and adjusting his toolbox strap. But I'm doing this my way, and I'm going to need some very specific equipment. The asteroid designated as Epsilon 7 was a chunk of rock and metal floating in the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter. It was about the size of a football stadium, with a rough surface covered in craters and strange formations that looked like frozen waterfalls. The Zephyrian Empire had chosen it because it was far enough from Earth to prevent interference, but close enough that both sides could reach it easily. 3 days after the paperwork mix-up that changed everything, Jake Morrison found himself standing on the surface of that asteroid, wearing a modified spacesuit and carrying his toolbox. He looked completely out of place. Next to the elaborate arena the aliens had built, the Zephyrians had constructed a dome of energy around part of the asteroid, creating an area with breathable air and artificial gravity. Inside the dome, they had built what looked like a coliseum made of dark metal and glowing crystals. Lights floated in the air without any visible support, and the walls showed moving pictures of alien worlds and battles. Jake was not impressed. Waste of energy, he muttered, checking his suit systems. They're running at least 12 different power sources just for the pretty lights. That's going to create interference patterns. Standing across from him was the Zephyrian champion, and Jake had to admit the alien was intimidating. Warlord Crickstyle was 3 meters tall, with gray skin that looked like it was made of metal. His arms were as thick as Jake's entire body, and his legs looked like they could kick through a concrete wall. Cables and wires ran along his neck and arms, connecting to devices that hummed with power. His eyes glowed red like warning lights. The alien wore armor that seemed to be alive, shifting and changing as he moved. Energy weapons were attached to his arms, and Jake could see more tools and weapons hanging from his belt. Everything about Crickstall screamed danger and death. Jake, on the other hand, was wearing his standard engineering coveralls under his spacesuit, magnetic boots that let him stick to metal surfaces, and a utility belt loaded with tools. His helmet had been modified with extra sensors and a heads-up display that showed him technical information about everything around him. He carried his favorite wrench in his right hand and a small device that looked like a flashlight in his left. The contrast was ridiculous. A giant alien war machine against a human maintenance worker. Around the arena, floating platforms held alien observers. Jake could see Supreme Commander Vextar, a tall alien wearing robes covered in glowing symbols. Next to him stood other Zephyrian leaders, all watching with expressions that Jake couldn't read, but assumed were either curiosity or amusement. On the human side, Admiral Blake sat with President White and a small group of Earth's leadership. They had been allowed to observe the combat, but Jake could see the worry on their faces, even from across the arena. Warriors of both civilizations. Vextar's voice boomed through the arena. We gather today to witness honorable combat between champions. This battle will determine the fate of the human world and its place in our empire. Kriegstall raised his weapons and made a sound that might have been a battle cry. It sounded like metal grinding against metal. Jake raised his wrench and waved it at the alien observers. Yeah, hi everyone. Let's get this over with. I've got a quantum resonator that needs calibrating when I get back. The Zephyrian leaders looked at each other in confusion. This was not how their sacred combat rituals usually began. Let the trial by combat commence, Vextar announced. Kriegstall immediately charged forward, moving faster than something his size should be able to. Move. His first punch would have turned a normal human into paste, but Jake was already moving. He had been watching the alien's stance and predicted the attack pattern. Jake rolled to the side, his magnetic boots automatically adjusting to keep him stable. Kriegstall's fist hit the ground where Jake had been standing, leaving a crack in the metal floor. Interesting, Jake said, pulling out a small scanner. Your servos are running about 15% inefficiently. That's going to cause heat buildup in your joints. Kriegstall swung again, this time with his left arm. Jake ducked under the blow and struck with his wrench, but not at the alien's body. Instead, he hit a specific point on Kriegstall's armor, where two cables met. The alien stumbled slightly as one of his weapon systems flickered. Poorly shielded connection, Jake explained, dodging another attack. You should really talk to your engineers about that. What the observers didn't realize was that Jake wasn't just fighting randomly. Every move he made was calculated. While Kriegstall was trying to crush him, Jake was studying his opponent's technology, looking for weaknesses and gathering information. The heads-up display in Jake's helmet was showing him energy readings, structural stress points, and electromagnetic signatures. He could see that Kriegstall's armor was powered by a small fusion reactor, that his weapons drew power through exposed conduits, and that his cybernetic implants were vulnerable to certain types of interference. Most importantly, Jake was mapping the power systems of the entire arena. The Zephyrians had built their combat dome with multiple redundant systems, but Jake could see how they were all connected. Every time he moved, he was positioning himself near power nodes and control panels. Kriegstall fired his energy weapons, sending bolts of superheated plasma across the arena. Jake dove behind a decorative pillar, but not before using his sonic screwdriver on a wall panel. To everyone watching, it looked like he was just trying to hide. In reality, he was rerouting power through the arena's systems. Your aim is off by about 3 degrees, Jake called out from behind the pillar. Your targeting system is compensating for the wrong gravitational constant. This asteroid's mass is different from what your computers think it is. Kriegstall roared in frustration and started tearing apart the pillar with his bare hands. Jake rolled out from behind it, staying low and moving toward another section of the arena. What happened next looked like cowardice to the alien observers. Jake appeared to be running away, diving behind equipment and crawling along the floor. Kriegstall pursued him, destroying everything in his path and growing more angry by the minute. But Jake wasn't running away. He was working. Every time he stopped behind cover, he was making quick modifications to the arena's systems. A wire reconnected here, a power coupling adjusted there, a feedback loop created in a third location. Stand and fight like a warrior, Kriegstall demanded, his voice coming through speakers in his armor. I am fighting, Jake replied, pulling out what looked like a simple multimeter. I'm just fighting smarter than you are. Jake connected his multimeter to a power conduit and began making adjustments. On his heads-up display, he could see the electromagnetic field patterns throughout the arena changing in response to his modifications. Kriegstall fired another energy blast, but this time something was different. The beam flickered and died halfway. To its target. What? Kriegstall looked down at his weapon in confusion. Electromagnetic interference, Jake explained, still working on the power conduit. I've been redirecting the arena's power grid to create overlapping field patterns. Your weapons are designed for clean power sources, not the chaotic mess I've turned this place into. Kriksdal tried to fire again, but his weapons were completely dead. He threw them aside and charged at Jake with his bare hands. Jake finished his work on the power conduit and stood up. Now we're getting somewhere. As Kriksdal reached him, Jake did something that surprised everyone. He didn't try to dodge or run. Instead, he grabbed onto the alien's arm and held on. "What are you doing?" Kriksdal demanded. "Completing the circuit," Jake said with a smile. Jake pressed a button on his utility belt, and suddenly the entire arena was filled with crackling electricity. But the energy wasn't random. Jake had spent the entire fight turning the arena into a giant electromagnetic field generator, and now he activated it. The electricity flowed through the metal floor, up through Kriksdal's armor, and directly into his cybernetic implants. Jake, wearing insulated boots and a grounded suit, was completely protected. Kriksdal was not. The alien champion collapsed to his knees as his enhanced systems shut down one by one. His strength dropped to normal biological levels. His speed decreased. His armor stopped shifting and became just heavy metal plates. "Impossible," Kriksdal whispered. "Not impossible," Jake said, walking over to his toolbox and pulling out a larger wrench. "Just good engineering." For the first time in the fight, Jake looked like he was in control. The arena was his machine now, and he knew exactly how to use it. Kriksdal struggled to his feet, his movements slow and clumsy without his cybernetic enhancements. The alien champion who had seemed invincible just minutes before now looked confused and vulnerable. His glowing red eyes had dimmed to a dull orange, and the cables that ran along his arms hung loose and powerless. "What have you done to me?" Kriksdal demanded, his voice no longer amplified by his armor speakers. Jake was already moving around the arena, checking his modifications. "To the power systems. I turned off your upgrades. All those cybernetic implants, the enhanced strength, the targeting computers, they all run on electrical power. I just redirected that power somewhere else." "This is not honorable combat," Kriksdal protested. "You use trickery and cowardice. I use intelligence," Jake replied, adjusting a control panel. "There's a difference." The alien observers were talking loudly among themselves in their own language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he could tell they were upset. Supreme Commander Vexstar was gesturing at the arena with obvious displeasure. On the human side, Admiral Blake was leaning forward in her seat, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. President White looked amazed and terrified at the same time. Kriksdal charged at Jake again, but without his enhanced speed, he was much easier to avoid. Jake simply stepped aside and let the alien crash into a wall. "You're still thinking like this is a straight fight," Jake said. "But I've turned this whole arena into my workshop. Every system here is under my control now." To prove his point, Jake pulled out a small remote control he had built from spare parts. He pressed a button, and the artificial gravity in one section of the arena suddenly increased. Kriksdal, who had been running toward Jake, suddenly found himself pressed down against the floor by forces 3 times stronger than normal. "Gravity control was built into the arena," Jake explained. "I just had to figure out how to access it. Took me about 10 minutes to crack their security codes. They're good engineers, but they think too much like warriors. They build their systems to be powerful, not secure." Jake pressed another button, and the gravity returned to normal. Kriksdal got up slowly, now looking wary as well as angry. "You cannot defeat me with tricks forever," the alien said. "I am Kriksdal the Undefeated. I have won over 200 battles. Against other warriors, Jake pointed out. When's the last time you fought an engineer? Kriksdal tried a different approach, picking up pieces of his broken weapons and throwing them at Jake. But Jake was ready for that too. He activated another system he had been working on, and energy shields appeared around him, deflecting the projectiles. Arena defense systems, Jake said, originally designed to protect the observers if the fight got too violent. I reprogrammed them to protect me instead. The alien champion was getting desperate. He began tearing apart the arena itself, pulling up pieces of the metal floor and hurling them at Jake. Some of the pieces were too big for the energy shields to stop completely. Jake had to dive and roll to avoid a chunk of metal that would have crushed him. For a moment, it looked like Kriksdal might have found a way to overcome Jake's technical advantages through brute force, but Jake had been expecting this too. As Kriksdal ripped up more of the floor, he was unknowingly exposing the power conduits and control systems that Jake had been modifying. Now Jake could access them directly. Thanks for the help, Jake said, connecting his tools to the newly exposed systems. I was wondering how I was going to reach those without making it obvious. Jake began making rapid adjustments to multiple systems at once. The lights in the arena started flashing in complex patterns. The floating observation platforms began moving in slow circles. Most importantly, the electromagnetic field that Jake had created earlier began to intensify. Kriksdal could feel the change in the air. The hair on his arms was standing up, and his skin was tingling with static electricity. What are you doing now? He asked, backing away from Jake. Turning you into a lightning rod, Jake said cheerfully. See, your armor is made of a metal that conducts electricity really well. And you're standing in the middle of what is now basically a giant Van de Graaff generator. Jake held up his remote control. When I press this button, every piece of metal you're wearing is going to attract about 1,000,000 volts of electricity. Your armor will protect you from dying, but it's going to hurt. A lot. Kriksdal looked around the arena frantically. You would not dare. This is supposed to be honorable single combat. Honor is a luxury I can't afford, Jake said. My planet is at stake, but I'll give you a choice. Surrender now, and I won't turn you into a living lightning bolt. Keep fighting and see what happens. For the first time since the combat began, Kriksdal hesitated. He had been trained his entire life to never give up, never show weakness, never surrender. But he had also never faced an opponent like this. Alien looked up at the observation platforms where his leaders were watching. Supreme Commander Vextar was standing now, his hands gripping the railing of his platform. I cannot surrender, Kriksdal said finally. It would bring dishonor to my entire family line. Then I'm sorry, Jake said, and pressed the button. Lightning filled the arena. Bolts of electricity arced from every surface to Kriksdal's armor, turning him into a writhing figure of crackling energy. The alien's roar of pain could be heard even over the sound of thunder, but Jake wasn't finished. While Kriksdal was distracted by the electricity, Jake was making even more modifications to the arena systems. He had realized that he could do more than just control the power grid. He could control everything. When the lightning stopped, Kriksdal collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from his armor. He was still alive, but clearly in pain and exhausted. Yield, Jake said. This doesn't have to continue. Kriksdal tried to stand, but Jake pressed another button on his remote. Suddenly, the artificial gravity under the alien's feet increased to 10 times normal. Kriksdal was pressed flat against the floor, unable to move. I've been studying your physiology through your armor's biosensors, Jake explained. I know exactly how much gravity your body can handle. I can keep you pinned here for hours if necessary. Jake walked over to where Kriksdal lay trapped by the crushing gravity. Here's what I don't understand about you warrior types. You think strength and honor are the same thing, But they're not. Real strength is solving problems. Real honor is protecting the people you care about. Jake adjusted his remote, and the gravity decreased enough for Krickstahl to lift his head. I didn't want to fight you, Jake continued. I wanted to be back on my space station, fixing my equipment and drinking coffee. But your people threatened my world, so here I am. I'm not doing this for glory or honor. I'm doing this because it's my job. Krickstahl stared at Jake with an expression that might have been respect. You fight like no warrior I have ever faced. That's because I'm not a warrior, Jake said. I'm an engineer. We solve problems by understanding systems and finding better ways to make them work. Your empire has a problem. You think the only way to expand is through conquest, but there are better ways. Jake held up his remote control one more time. I can increase the gravity enough to crush you, or electrocute you, or turn off the artificial atmosphere in your section of the arena. I have complete control over every system in this place. But I don't want to kill you. I want you to understand something. What? Krickstahl asked. Humans don't just build warriors. We build thinkers. Every human engineer, scientist, and technician is trained to see problems and create solutions. We don't conquer worlds. We fix them. And if your empire is smart, you'll figure out how to work with us instead of trying to crush us. Jake pressed a button, and the gravity returned to normal. Krickstahl slowly got to his feet, his armor damaged, but his pride intact. You have defeated me, the alien said formally. I yield to the human champion. The arena fell silent except for the humming of the modified power systems Jake had created. The silence in the arena lasted for exactly 37 seconds. Jake knew because he was timing it on his helmet display while he checked the power systems to make sure nothing was going to explode. Supreme Commander Vextar was the first to speak. His voice carried across the arena with the weight of authority and barely controlled anger. This is impossible. Krickstahl has never been defeated. He is our greatest champion, enhanced with the finest technology our empire possesses. Jake looked up at the alien leader's platform. Your technology is pretty good, but it has design flaws. Want me to make you a list? The other Zephyrian observers were talking loudly in their own language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. They were upset, confused, and probably arguing about what to do next. Krickstahl was still standing in the center of the arena, looking at Jake with something that might have been curiosity. How did you learn to do this? Are all human warriors like you? I'm not a warrior, Jake said for what felt like the 100th time. I'm an engineer. And no, not all humans are like me. Some are doctors, some are teachers, some are farmers. But we all learn to solve problems. Engineers, Vextar repeated slowly. You sent an engineer to face our greatest warrior. Actually, they sent me by accident, Jake admitted. There was a paperwork mix-up, but it worked out. Admiral Blake's voice came through Jake's communication system. Jake, the alien ships around Earth are powering up their weapons. I think they're planning to attack regardless of the combat outcome. Jake sighed and pulled out his remote control. Hold that thought, Admiral. He turned to face Vextar's platform. Commander, we need to talk. But first, you should probably tell your ships to power down their weapons. Because if they fire on Earth, I'm going to demonstrate what else I can do with the technology in this. Garena, you threaten us? Vextar asked. I'm offering a professional consultation, Jake replied. See, while I was modifying the arena systems, I also figured out how your communication network operates, and your ship's navigation systems, and your weapon targeting protocols. Jake held up a small device he had built from spare parts. This little gadget can broadcast on the same frequencies your ships use to talk to each other. With the right signal, I can make them think they're getting orders from you. Vextar's eyes widened slightly. You could not have broken our encryption code so quickly. Your encryption is based on mathematical principles that were developed by a warrior culture, Jake explained. You made it complicated, but not smart. It took me about 20 minutes to crack it. Engineers think differently than warriors. To prove his point, Jake activated his device. On the screens around the arena, they could see the alien ships in Earth orbit suddenly changing formation, moving into a defensive pattern instead of an attack formation. I just told them you ordered a strategic withdrawal, Jake said. They'll hold that position until they get new orders from you. The alien observers fell completely silent. Supreme Commander Vextar stared at Jake like he was looking at a dangerous animal. You have defeated our champion and compromised our fleet, Vextar said slowly. Yet you have not destroyed us. Why? Jake put away his device and picked up his toolbox. Because destroying things is wasteful. I'd rather fix them. Fix them? Your empire has a problem, Jake explained. You think the only way to grow is by conquering other worlds. But conquest is inefficient. It creates resistance, destroys resources, and makes enemies. There are better ways. Jake gestured toward the human observation platform. Earth doesn't have an empire, but we have relationships with dozens of colonies and space stations. We trade technology, share resources, solve problems together. It works better than conquest. Crickstall, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. But how do you maintain order without strength? How do you prevent rebellion? By not giving people reasons to rebel, Jake said. If you help someone solve their problems instead of creating new ones for them, they tend to like you better. Jake began disconnecting his modifications from the arena's power systems while he talked. Even during a diplomatic conversation, he couldn't resist the urge to clean up his work. Your empire is facing problems, he continued. Resource shortages on some worlds, technological stagnation, resistance movements. Am I right? Vextar nodded slowly. Our expansion has become more difficult in recent years. The worlds we encounter are better defended, more organized. Because conquest teaches people to defend themselves, Jake pointed out. But cooperation teaches people to work together. If you approached new worlds as potential partners instead of targets, you'd probably get better results. And you believe humans could help with this? Vextar asked. We're good at solving problems, Jake said. That's what we do. Give us a broken system, and we'll figure out how to fix it. Give us a working system, and we'll figure out how to make it better. Admiral Blake's voice came through Jake's communicator again. Jake, we're receiving a communication from the alien fleet. They're requesting permission to enter Earth's atmosphere for face-to-face negotiations. Jake looked up at Vextar. Your choice, Commander. You can honor the results of the combat trial and negotiate with us as equals. Or you can attack Earth and find out what happens when you make 8 billion humans angry at the same time. 8 billion engineers? Crickstall asked. Not all engineers, Jake admitted, but 8 billion problem solvers. Scientists, technicians, mechanics, programmers, doctors, teachers. People who spend their lives figuring out how to make things work better. Jake finished packing his tools and stood up. Look, I need to get back to my space station. I've got a quantum resonator that's been acting up for 3 days. And if I don't fix it soon, we're going to lose communication with half our monitoring systems. You would leave now? Vextar asked. In the middle of negotiations that could determine the future of both our civilizations? That's what diplomats are for, Jake said. I'm an engineer. I fixed the immediate problem, which was preventing a war. Now the people who are good at talking can work out the details. Jake started walking toward the arena exit, then stopped, and turned back. But I'll give you some free advice, Commander. If you do decide to work with humans instead of conquering us, don't try to understand us by studying our warriors or our leaders. Study our engineers, our teachers, our mechanics, the people who build things and fix things and solve problems. That's where you'll find the real strength of humanity. And what is that strength? Vexstar asked. Jake smiled and held up his wrench. We don't just break things that are in our way. We figure out how to make them work for us instead. 6 months later, Jake was back on the Meridian space station, working on a new quantum resonator design. The coffee maker was working perfectly, the artificial gravity was stable, and the communication arrays were functioning better than ever. The reason for the improved performance was sitting at a workbench across the engineering bay. Kriksdal, former champion of the Zephyrian Empire, was carefully installing a power coupling using tools that Jake had taught him to use. The energy flow is still fluctuating, Kriksdal said in his careful English. Should I adjust the harmonic frequency? Try increasing it by 0.3%, Jake suggested without looking up from his own work. And remember to check the thermal readings. Those power couplings get hot if they're not properly balanced. The Technology Exchange Program had been one of the first agreements reached between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians, sharing knowledge and solving problems that neither group could handle alone. Jake's communicator beeped with an incoming message. It was from Admiral Blake. Jake, we've got a situation developing in the Centauri system. The Andromedan Collective is threatening 3 human colonies and 2 Zephyrian outposts. They're demanding tribute and threatening to destroy anyone who refuses. The diplomatic teams are requesting technical support. Jake looked at his workbench, covered with half-finished projects and repair jobs that needed attention. Then he looked at Kriksdal, who was listening to the message with obvious interest. What do you think? Jake asked the alien. Feel like taking a field trip? Kriksdal set down his tools and smiled, an expression that looked terrifying on his face, but that Jake had learned meant the alien was happy. Another engineering problem? Kriksdal asked. Looks like it, Jake said, reaching for his toolbox. Someone needs to teach the Andromedans that threatening people is inefficient. As they prepared to leave for another crisis that would probably require more creative problem-solving than traditional diplomacy, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a simple engineer who just wanted to fix his equipment and drink his coffee in peace. Now, he was apparently becoming known throughout the galaxy as the human who defeated an alien champion with a wrench and a bad attitude. Diplomats called him for advice. Military leaders wanted to study his tactics. Scientists wanted to understand his methods. But Jake still thought of himself as just an engineer who was good at fixing things. The only difference was that now the things that needed fixing were a little bigger than quantum resonators and coffee machines.